On this week's episode of Behind the Spacebar, we are taking a look back at one of my favorite episodes that happened a long time ago at the beginning of the year. I'll be sharing some brand new thoughts and we'll be listening to the episode together. Hey everyone, welcome back to Behind the Spacebar. This is the podcast where musicians, music directors, playback techs, really anyone performing on stage with Ableton Live. You may even be an artist that's looking to take your performance to the next level. Whoever you are, I'm thankful you're here, thankful you're part of this community. What we're doing in the month of December is we are looking back at previous episodes earlier in the year. We're playing back those episodes, listening together, and then I am wrapping up the episode at the end with brand new thoughts you never heard before. We're staying on the earlier side of the year for these first couple episodes. Today we're listening back to episode 5, Stop Focusing on How and Start Focusing on Why. Funny story on this, I actually thought I'm planning episodes for the end of the year and starting to look into next year, and I thought, oh, this will be a great episode to talk about because I was so passionate about this. And I'll tell you kind of the phrase I used and the wrap up here after the episode. But I went to look back and I went, I think I've talked about this before, and I had. So that was episode 5. So we're going to go back and listen to this together, and I want to encourage you to stick around to the end because this isn't just a replay episode with a brand new intro. At the very end, I'm going to recap this and share some brand new original thoughts. So let's dive into today's episode. Stop focusing on how, start focusing on why, and then make sure to stick around here in a couple minutes. I'll be right back with some brand new, fresh thoughts. Today's show is on something that I've seen. It's kind of a general trend that I've seen, I think, changing in the past few years. Although it's a old story, it's a story we've all heard, for many, many years, and something that I think people have struggled with for many, many years. And today we're talking all about fishing. And you may know where I'm going with this if you start to piece 2 and 2 together. But we're talking about something that I've seen, I think, definitely grow in the past few years as, I wouldn't say a concern that I have, but it's something that I think differentiates people that tend to be really successful playback techs, people that tend to be successful in a production field, in a technical field, even in a creative field. I think they kind of get this. And so here's the thing. I want to start at the really good part about this. I think never before in history, and that's a bold statement, but I think never before in a time in history, at a single place in the world, you look at the timeline of the existence of the world, I don't think have we ever been a society that's been so blessed that we literally have the answer to any question that we want at our fingertips. I mean, literally any single answer to any question you have. You think of any question you have, you can find the answer to that on the internet. If you want to learn something, learn a new skill, figure out how to solve a problem, the answer is a Google search away, and it's likely even free. We have a minivan, and I remember a couple months ago, the seat in our minivan got stuck and it wouldn't go back up. And so we're like, well, that's it. It's time to finally buy a new van. That's just the life we're living. That's what we got to do. And of course, after a little bit of Googling, my wife found a YouTube video of someone that said, here's how to fix this backseat issue in a Honda Odyssey van. And we fixed it, and it was completely for free. I know folks that have completely learned how to code, how to create and develop apps simply by just Googling. Watching a YouTube video. Maybe they even did pay to join a community, a course, to learn how to get better at something. But literally, if they wanted to learn how to program, how to code, to develop apps, the resources, the training are out there. From studio to stage, we talked about this a couple episodes again. We're a community focused on helping people learn how to run tracks like a pro, focusing on helping people learn how to use Ableton Live on stage, whether it's for keys, to create a connected stage, to control your production elements, to run tracks, whatever it is. That's kind of the community that we're about. And so if you want to learn how to run tracks like a pro, you can go to FromStudiotoStage and you can learn that. Here's the thing, though. It's an amazing time. But while this is amazing, we've all got to learn to fish. And here's what I mean by that. I think we all know the old saying, and I think some of you kind of knew where I was going with this. We all knew the old saying, you can give a man a fish and feed him for a day, or you can teach a man to fish and you can feed him for a lifetime, right? Now, I don't like fish, so if you gave me a fish, I would starve because I wouldn't eat it. So it's not a great analogy, but we, as a society, again, I see this developing more and more, but I think we're kind of trained to do this now. We have a problem. We go to Google. Why is this not working? How to fix, how to learn, blah, blah, blah. We search for the how. We're really good at that. Again, we live in an amazing time that we have amazing sources that that teach us the how, that give us the answers to that. But here's what I really think and believe, and I've seen this in my life, and I don't always get it right, and I don't always do it well. But I've seen this in folks that I look up to, folks that I think are really good at their jobs at what they do. If we want to make an impact, if we want to grow, get a better gig, we've got to stop asking how. We've got to stop focusing on how. We've got to learn to ask why. I think if we want to move beyond where we are, we want to grow in a skill, we want to master a skill, to become an expert at, I don't know, Ableton Live, at songwriting, at recording, at running lights, whatever it is, whatever you're listening to this, whatever it is. I think if we want to get better at that, we've got to stop asking and focusing on the how and asking, how do we do it? And we've got to start, asking, but ultimately we've got to start learning why. Here's what I mean by that. I'll give you an example. This is hyper specific to my field, to something I've seen, to content I've created. And so if you're not in the tracks world and you just happen to be listening, maybe, I don't know why you'd listen to this if you're not in the tracks world, but if you are, then so thankful you're here. But if that happens to be you, this may be a little more technical, a little more in the weeds than you hoped, but I'll share an example. So there's this concept in using tracks and using Ableton Live that I've taught a lot over the past few years. That's called using a virtual MIDI bus. And in particular, on the Mac side of things, it's this thing called the IAC driver. That's kind of the ticket, the thing to do that. In fact, actually, as I'm recording this tutorial, we have a tutorial going out on what day is that? I think Friday, where I basically show 3 of my favorite kind of tips and tricks for using that. It's something I talk about a lot. If you Google IAC driver Ableton, you'll find mostly my content, because it's something I've talked about for a very long time, talking about a lot more. So one of the concepts, one of the things you can do with the IAC driver, for example, is how do you get Ableton Live to stop? And that sounds like a silly thing, but you're in arrangement view, you have your tracks loaded in, you go from track 1 to track 2, it's going to automatically just kind of flow. But what if I want to have it go and then I want it to stop? Okay. So a lot of people Google, how to get Ableton Live to stop, how to create a stop track or something, whatever the terminology is that gets you there. Stop track, Ableton Live, IAC driver, MIDI clip, whatever. They Google that and they get there. Well, if you approach this the way most of us approach it, you'll go and you'll watch that video and you will learn how to get Ableton Live to stop. And in the midst of that, you'll learn how to set up the IAC driver. If it's a tutorial I've done, I'll talk far too long about what the IAC driver is. I'll talk about how to set it up, and you'll do that. You'll learn how to create a MIDI clip and map it to the stop button. And that's great. And those are all really good things. That's a good skill to ask. But if you walk away from that and you only approach that tutorial and you only learn how to do that one specific skill, then you only learn how to create a stop clip with Ableton Live. But if you learn what the IAC driver does, and if you understand why that works, why at the core of me taking this MIDI clip and routing it, why does it work that way? And you start to kind of process and you think through, then you go, oh, okay. So the reason that works is basically like the MIDI clip I'm doing is basically functioning like a MIDI controller. It's almost like I'm taking this physical MIDI controller. You could see the Oak Board Mini over my shoulder there as my camera tries to focus and get into focus there. That's my favorite MIDI controller. In fact, I just did a video that's airing this week where I talk about that MIDI controller. It's my favorite MIDI controller. I basically am creating my own kind of MIDI controller, and I'm putting that in Ableton Live, but it's going to be a MIDI clip is the way that that's going to function and the way that that's going to trigger. So if I start thinking about that, then I can go, man, I wonder if I could turn Ableton Live's metronome on and off. And then I start thinking, okay, if I can map my MIDI controller to Ableton Live's metronome to turn it on and off, and I just figured out how to create a stop clip and how to map a MIDI clip to Ableton Live stop, then I wonder if I could create another MIDI clip and map that to Ableton Live's metronome and turn that on and off just like I did a MIDI controller. Does that make sense how I got there? If I approach how to get Ableton Live to automatically stop, and the only thing I walk away from that particular tutorial with is how to do that specific thing, then I learned one thing, and then I was fed for a day, to borrow the much overused analogy. But two, if I look at that tutorial and I watch that tutorial and I go, okay, why does it work this way? What's actually happening? What's the core principle here? What's the first principle that's at play here? And I learned that and I figured that out. And I realized, oh, I can take a MIDI clip and anything that is in purple and live can be assigned to be controlled by MIDI. And I can actually create a MIDI clip in live and using the virtual MIDI bus, assign that to anything that's purple that can be controlled via MIDI. So I can create MIDI clips. Well, then if I need to control this thing and it's controllable by MIDI, I can create a clip, send it to the virtual MIDI driver and do that, right? When we stop to think about the why and we dig deeper and we try to get to the core value, the core thing, then we start to add tools to our tool belt. We start to add specific tools, specific resources, so that if we encounter a problem in the future, then we can stop and go, do I have a skill? Do I have a tool that will help me learn this in the future, as opposed to just solving one specific thing? So here's three kind of specific things, three takeaways I want to leave you with, or three things to consider that I think will help, and then we'll wrap up this episode. So number one, whenever you encounter a problem, whenever you find a solution to a problem, I think both of those, like one, there's a problem, what's going on here? Two, you find the solution. I think so many times we find a solution and we move on, and we stop to ask, why did the thing we did solve it? I see that a lot, and I promise I'm not going to go on a big diatribe here and a big soapbox, but I see this a lot with a lot of younger folks that create Ableton Live tutorials for YouTube. And that's something I've been doing for years. I'll see a lot of times where they'll make a tutorial and they say, oh, you have to do this thing so that this will work. And just because I've done it longer than them, or I've made more mistakes than them, I'll go, actually, that's not why it works. The reason it works is because of this. And that's a situation that they had a problem, they found a solution, or they found a thing that solves it, but they didn't go that step deeper to go, why does it work this way? So when you encounter a problem, you find a solution to a problem, I want you to stop. I want you to dig deeper and ask why. Why does it work? Okay. If this works, then does this work? Oh, okay. Actually, both of these methods work. Well, which one's the better method? Like if you're writing computer code, there's a way to write code and to develop something. And then there's another way to write code and develop something. Both of them are working. So which one's the better way? Well, obviously the one that's the cleanest code, the least amount of steps is the best solution. The simplest solution is likely the solution that's going to exist there. But I want you to stop. I want you to dig deeper, ask why. Why does it work? Why didn't it work? Okay. If something stops working and then suddenly it starts working again, that's never good enough for me. I hate solutions. Raise your hand, leave a comment, however virtually you can do that. Let me know if you're like this, in the sense of you have a problem, you find a solution, or maybe you don't find a solution, but you have a problem and then suddenly it just starts working again. There's nothing you did. There's nothing you changed. There's no structure that changed or whatever to solve that problem. It just suddenly started working again. I don't like those problems. I don't like those problems because I like problems that I go, oh, the reason this didn't work is this. The reason it now works is because of this. Therefore, in the future, I'm going to always make sure I restart my Wi-Fi. I'm always going to build a checklist to make sure I plug my computer in, whatever it is. Like, kind of go through your thing to figure that out and to process it and to make sure everything works. The second thing I would highly encourage you to do, and this is, I guess this applies to more things, but I'm going to make it very hyper specific to the world of Ableton Live, the world of software, plugins, for keys players, plugins for audio effects. We can even extend it to hardware, but I want you to ask the question, or I want you to learn the worldview of that particular software, that particular hardware. When I think about Ableton Live, what is Ableton Live's focus? What is Ableton Live's worldview? As a company, what is Ableton about? That's going to help me understand how and why they developed and created their software the way they did. Ableton is about creating software that's quick and easy. It's adaptable. They highly, highly value creativity over engineering, creativity over, a very specific kind of process to have to do this, to do that. So for instance, with Live, to create a track, I hit Command T, I create a track. To create an audio track, to create a MIDI track, Command Shift T, I create a MIDI track. It just works really, really quickly. When it comes to warping, this is something, again, I'm getting hyper specific here, but when it comes to warping, that's something that I talk to people often, and I say, what really helps with warping is understanding how Live treats audio. I can just tell you how to warp a track and you're going to go, okay, but you're going to be frustrated because you're not going to understand why you have to do this. You're not going to understand this particular step. But if you understand the worldview, then you're going to go, oh, as long as I put the tempo in first, and as long as I have a click with my stems, as long as my, when I have tempo changes, my click also has those tempo changes, I'm fine. There's no reason for me to stress there. You know, I don't have a lot going on. I don't have, it's just easy. And the reason it's easy is because I understand the worldview. So, take a moment, try to learn to understand the worldview of that particular software, of that hardware. Is it built more for creativity, for fast work, or is it built more for fine-tuned work, very engineering driven, as opposed to more kind of creativity, capture ideas quickly? What's it built for? And you'll understand, I guess, one, if that software is right for you and if it's the correct software for you or hardware, or two, you'll understand how the next time you have a problem, how you may be able to solve that because you understand the worldview. Third thing that I want to encourage you to do here is pursue more than surface level knowledge. I'm preaching to myself here on this. I am someone who enjoys learning things. I enjoy learning why things work. I enjoy, going deeper onto things and on subjects. But I have learned the older I've got, there's only so much time I have. I have a family, I have a wife. I want to spend more time with them than I do with Ableton Live. So I can't go really, really deep on everything. So I've realized I have to, it's necessary to be surface level at certain things, but I found that things that are very essential to my skill set, things that are essential to my workflow, I can't be surface level on. You've got to understand why something works the way it works. You've got to go beyond just plug this in, do this certain incantation, snap your fingers twice, blink once, and lift up your right leg. And as long as you do that, it's going to work. You've got to understand the reason it works this time and not that time is this, right? That's going to be super, super helpful when it comes to going beyond just the how and moving more into the why. So again, I think to be successful, to continually get and keep the gig, I think you need to move and shift from asking how and trying to figure out how something works and shifting and asking why does it work the way it does. And I think we'll gain a lot of that. And again, as a reminder, 3 things that will that I think will help us with this is, number 1, dig deeper, ask why. Why does it work? Why didn't it work? Number 2, learn the worldview of that software or hardware that you're using. That's really going to help you understand how to potentially solve future problems or to understand why that problem happened in the first place. And then 3, and again, I'm preaching to myself here, pursue more than surface level knowledge on things. Go deeper, dive deeper, really ask why to really understand. That's all I got for today. But here's the thing. If you're finding yourself in this situation, if you're listening to this and maybe you're a little convicted and going, I've very much looked at Ableton Live at that surface level thing. Like, I'm just kind of do my thing. I build it. No one touch anything. I know a lot of us kind of create and engineer these solutions and go, no one change anything. No one look at anything. And we talked a couple episodes ago about humbly confident, humbly curious. Well, this ties into that curious spot, is tied into understanding why. If you find yourself in the situation of, when it comes to Ableton Live, asking why, hoping to understand, looking to dive deeper, then I would encourage you to head to FromStudiotoStage.com/free. That is one really easy, simple step. It's just full of free resources, free tutorials, free downloads. They're going to help you get beyond surface level to help you go a little bit deeper. And I think that's the first step for you. Now you may be ready to commit and ready to go, I'm ready to join a community that's going to help lead me along the way. If so, then go to FromStudiotoStage.com. I'll include a link below that takes you right to the subscribe page as well. But just go to the site, check it out, see if it's for you. But I definitely would encourage you, FromStudiotoStage.com/free. You'll see all our free resources there we have about running tracks, templates, all sorts of stuff, free tutorials. Those are things that are going to help you go from the how to the why, to really kind of get going, and using Ableton Live in a successful way. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed that episode. Like I joked in the beginning, I was sitting down to plan an episode and I came up with this title for an episode. I said, focus on this one skill to succeed. And I was going to tease that out. And the whole episode was going to be around how versus why. And then I thought, oh, wait, I think I recorded that. And again, I went back in the archives and I went, January 31st is when I recorded episode 5 of the podcast. Stop focusing on how and start focusing on why. The new title that I had for this, again, I really do mean focus on this one skill to succeed. This is so important. And I know I said this last week, and I'm probably the next couple weeks going to say, oh, this is so important. But I see this as one of the big faults of people that have been doing this for a while, that have been using tracks for a while. Let's talk tracks just in particular. I see a lot of people that have, and a couple episodes ago on the podcast, we talked about experience versus knowledge. That kind of ties into this as well too. But I see people that are particularly have a lot of experience that are kind of set in their ways. They're not embodying the humbly confident, humbly curious thing. They're not reaching in into the humbly curious part, leaning into that. And what they're solely doing is they're just focused on the how side of things. They're the type of people, I do this for some things, not all things, but the type of people that just go to YouTube and go, how to blah, 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 blah. And they learn a thing and they move on. Let me get hyper specific here. I'll just, let's be transparent. So when I'm creating content for YouTube, when I'm creating content for courses, one of the things I do is I search and I try to find who else has created that content. And I try to watch every piece of content I can find related to that. And that's one piece of it, but the bigger piece of that is then to read comments of what people have said. And there's a couple things recently that I've been preparing for, and I've watched tutorials, and there's one topic where I have found 5 tutorials that have been recorded in the past year of people showing how to set something up in Ableton Live. I'll just say how to set up network MIDI on a Mac, that they tell people things that are completely incorrect. And in fact, they tell people things that will cause issues with their setup. And this bugs me as someone who's constantly striving for the truth. And again, that makes me sound holier than thou. But when I say I'm constantly striving for the truth, I'm not looking just for how, I'm looking for why. And what I mean is figure something out and then I go, why does it work that way? Or why does it not work that way? And what I find so many of us do is we work to the point that we discover the answer to how, but we don't go far enough to get to the point where we discover why. There's a problem with something and we say, oh, it's because my stems in Ableton were different sample rates. Well, I promise you, if you dig a little further, that's not the problem. You go, oh, it was because there's a bug on M1 Max that I needed to drop my buffer size. Yeah, it all makes sense now. So when it comes down to this, I think this is super important. I want to encourage all of us to do this. I will say last week's episode, something I really struggled with. This week's episode, just to be frank, I think this is something I do better than most people that I know, is I try to strive to go past the how and I go to the why. Now, granted, this is a one very small, particular, sound like Liam Neeson, set of skills. This is one skill set I have. I don't go beyond this when it comes to fixing my fence that I have to do at my house or changing the oil in my car. I just go take that to someone to do. I just watch a YouTube video about fixing my fence. I don't go, dive deep into it. So I understand it. But for this one particular skill set, I think this is something I do pretty well when it comes to music tech, when it comes to diving into understanding why, something that really benefits me. So I just got a brand new, I would get up and grab it, but you're not supposed to have an empty frame. But sitting right next to me is a brand new MIDI controller that I just got. In fact, there's one over my head you can't see right now, but I got 2 brand new MIDI controllers in the past week. And one of the things I strive to do when I get a new piece of gear is I try to figure out the story that gear is telling. And that sounds very mystical and very philosophical, but essentially what I'm talking about is what's the kind of worldview that the developers of this piece of hardware or software had when they created it? And then how does that impact things? And when I dig to that sort of level in thinking of products, it helps me understand why does it function the way it does. It helps me go, I wonder if I can, and I think about it through the scope, through the lens of that worldview, and then I figure out how to do it, which is super powerful. So I think as we head into 2023, one of the most important things we can focus on, again, please embody humbly confident, humbly curious. We talked about that last week, but I think this is one we can all work on to strive to go past just simply how and to really dive into why. Now, if you're looking practically when it comes to Ableton Live, how to go past how and how to dig into why, you're not going to find that on YouTube. And I post a brand new tutorial every single day on YouTube. I'm sold on YouTube. Like, I don't know anyone that makes more content on YouTube than I do. Maybe Gary Vaynerchuk, but other than him, I make a lot of content because I believe in YouTube. But what you will not find on YouTube is a lot of why. You'll find a lot of how, not a lot of why. But if you want a lot of how, or if you want a lot of why, I'm confused myself. on Ableton Live, as well as the how, then head to FromStudiotoStage.com/subscribe. It's a great way to end the year, to learn not just how to do something in Ableton Live, but why. And this is going to make a difference when it comes to troubleshooting. It's going to make a difference in you hoping to get and keep a gig, because anybody can press spacebar, but there's a true art to performing live on stage with tracks. There's a true art to playback and doing it really well and doing it with flexibility and stability and doing it in a way that's efficient. And you're not going to learn that on YouTube. Even from my content, it'll take you so far. But when I'm off of YouTube and I have a little more time and I can break things apart, I can really explain why, which is going to benefit you in the end. So if that sounds like something you're interested in, then head to FromStudiotoStage.com/subscribe. Again, end the year strong, and dive in and learn how to master Ableton Live for live performance. And again, if you're not ready to commit quite yet, like I said, I post a brand new tutorial every single day on YouTube. If you're watching on YouTube right now, hit subscribe, enable the bell icon. If not, you're listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify to this podcast, then head over to YouTube. It's just youtube.com/FromStudiotoStage. And hit subscribe, enable the bell icon. You'll see when I go live. Join me next week. We got a couple more of these. Next week, oh, this is gonna be a good one. We're talking about what to do when things go wrong. You're really gonna love this. See you there. Have a great week. See you next Monday. Take care, everybody. Bye.